So these are the Unit 3 learning objectives. We're going to look at the different ways in which markets are segmented. We're going to look at how to identify a target market, the target market of a firm's offerings. We're going to explain the concept of product positioning, and we're also going to talk about the importance of branding. And as I've done with every session, and I just would like to reinforce it, is why do we have learning objectives? And the reason is because each learning objective ties back directly to the course material and to the content that we explore throughout the course. The assessments are tied directly to each learning objective, and of course, understanding the elements of a learning objective can help you with test preparation. Now, as Mike mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into, type them in at any given point, and we will have designated breaks throughout the review, for your questions. So feel free to put them in at any time. So to begin, these are the topics that we're going to review in Unit 3. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about segmentation, positioning, what makes a market attractive to a particular company. We'll look at target market selection, branding, as I mentioned, and many of the aspects that help companies identify their target markets, which include demographics and psychographics. We'll talk about positioning, value proposition, which is so important, as well as brand equity. So the first learning objective is to describe the different methods of market segmentation. And the topics that we will explore for this learning objective include the benefits of targeting and segmenting markets, the factors associated with geographic segmentation, how organizations use demographic data for market segmentation, how they use psychographic data to enhance the demographic segmentation, and we'll talk about those elements specifically, and the factors associated with behavioral segmentation. So you can see that there are many different ways that markets can be segmented, and we will, in this unit and in this learning outcome, explore those. So the first thing is, let's talk about targeting and segmenting markets. And what this does is it enables companies to better adapt their offerings, expand their customer base, and also help companies avoid direct competition with other companies. Sometimes companies will use targeting and segmenting markets to remarket some of their older items, also create new offerings. Companies are always coming out with new products. Targeting and segmenting also can help companies to determine how they're going to best spend their marketing dollars. So they might reallocate them, they might add some new elements to the marketing mix, and targeting and segmenting those markets will help identify those factors. They can also look at ways to retain their customers and also identify early adopters. And when we talk about early adopters, we're talking about the segment of the marketplace of people that will be the first ones to use a particular product or service when it comes out. So these are the benefits of targeting and segmenting markets. So let's move on to talk about geographic segmentation. And what this really does is basically divide a market based on location. So gathering information based on where a customer is located, then companies can use a process called geocoding and identify segments of the marketplace in a particular area. So it helps identify where customers are clustered, to understand the characteristics of people within a particular area, and help to develop very specific targeted marketing activities. And as we move forward with this unit, we'll look at how all of the different elements of segmentation work together. So if we think about, and in a little bit we'll look at demographics, but if you look at geographic segmentation, think about the different lifestyles that people have in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. Do they live in small villages? Do they live in highly densely populated cities? What's the weather like in those particular areas? And if we think about all of those factors, people that live in varied locations will be making different purchase decisions. And so it's important to understand the characteristics of geographic segmentation and how that will influence what we buy, what we do, where we go, and how we think. So if we move on to demographic segmentation, which is a very basic way, excuse me, of segmenting a marketplace. And I'm sorry, Mike, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say real quick to everyone, I'm getting a little bit of audio trouble on YouTube, so if that's happening for you, we're working on it on the back end. If we, but it's everything says I'm streaming fine, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on for everyone. If there's a problem, don't worry. This is being recorded, so there will be a link below. If any little, it's just little words here and there, but I think we're good enough to keep going. But if anyone's having any trouble, don't worry. This is being archived in case you're having any trouble with getting to us right now.
Okay, so Mike, I can continue.
Yeah, we're perfectly fine to keep going.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. So where were we? Okay, demographic segmentation. So demographic segmentation encompasses factors that we can measure. They're very specific. We can gather the data and we can measure. So we can determine the ages of people within a certain segment of the marketplace. We can determine gender and income. We can measure family size, education, marital status, occupation, religion, and so on. And all of the factors that if when we're gathering the information, we have a multiple choice question, those can be checked off and we can calculate those factors. But the aspect of demographic segmentation, which makes it not standalone, is that just because people might be in the same age group or at the same income level or the same education level, they still might not be making the same purchase decisions, and they may not be living the same kinds of lifestyles. And so this is where, if we go back to the previous topic of geographic segmentation, right, at this point early on, we can see how demographic factors as well as geographic factors can help identify very specific segments of the marketplace that might have different needs or different preferences than other groups. Now, if we add that to psychographic data, and psychographic data describes a target market. I'm sorry, Mike, was there something?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to bring the stream down for a second. I can't hear it, and I'm not entirely sure why. But everyone will be back for just a second. I'm gonna try something on the back end. We're gonna pause it here. We'll be back in just a second. I do not have sorry, we don't have a good maintenance graphic. Hello, everyone. We're back. Sorry about that. Hopefully, everything else will be back good in the archive. If not, I'll make sure there's links in the bottom to alternate versions to make sure everything's good. I think what we should do is just probably just restart at this slide and keep going. I
Sure.
think it's
All
all
right.
right. Sounds good. Sorry,
Uh,
everybody.
that's all right. Mike, I just want to say we have another little glitch perhaps as I hear an echo when I speak.
Okay. I'm sure I can solve that for you in just a
Let me see if
moment.
it's still there. Okay, I think it's corrected itself. Okay. All right. Sorry, everyone. All right. So where were we? Okay. Psychographic data and demographic segmentation. So the previous slide, we talked about demographic data, which are elements that we can measure and that we can specifically identify. Uh, but psychographic data describes a target market. It encompasses things like lifestyles, values, and attitudes of consumer groups, which can't be measured in the same way that demographic data can be measured, but also is very essential for segmentation. So, for example, when I spoke earlier about how you can take demographic information and geographic information and put that together to identify a segment of the population, now add in the lifestyles of those people and their values and their attitudes. And the people that you will identify within your group will now change. So it's important to recognize that because all of these factors impact the way people will make their decisions. And one of the tools that marketers use is something called VALS, VALS, which stands for values, attitudes, and lifestyles. And marketers use this tool to identify different consumer groups. And within those consumer groups, there are different characteristics and different behaviors. And the groups have been identified as innovators, thinkers, achievers, experiencers, believers, strivers, makers, and survivors. And each of these different groups that have been identified have specific characteristics that marketers use when it comes time to identifying a segment of the marketplace, and then from there developing marketing strategies that will be most effective at reaching those consumers. Now, um, let's talk about behavioral segmentation. And what this encompasses is how we act towards a product. Uh, we use products in different ways. So the first aspect could possibly be benefits. We started to promote suntan lotion use at other times of the year. In addition to that, I'm sorry. Okay. Mike, I know this is, do you want to reschedule this?
Hey everyone. Uh, so we're going to have to call this one right now, but we are going to I will put a link to the full video in the comment section below this in the description. I'll put it on our YouTube homepage, and I'll make sure that if you have a Saylor Academy, your email is connected to Saylor Academy for this course, that link is sent out to you. I'm sorry, I do not know what is going on with YouTube right now because, of course, as I'm telling you this, it is going out to YouTube perfectly. But if you guys want to leave now, that's great. We're going to finish up, and I'll make sure that a good version is on YouTube as soon as possible after this. So I'll hand it back over. We'll restart this slide, and we'll go through regardless of the technical difficulties on everyone else's end. With my apologies.
All right, so let's review behavioral segmentation. And this really focuses on how consumers act toward a product. And one of these is benefit segmentation. And this really talks about the benefits that consumers seek when they're using a product or service. Usage refers to how often a product is used. And this can also help marketers identify new ways that consumers can utilize a brand. And I'd like to use the example of suntan lotion because traditionally suntan lotion is something that we use when we go to the beach, when we're at the pool, perhaps when we're out hiking, and generally associated with the summertime. But there have been marketing campaigns to promote suntan lotion usage at other times of the year. So, for example, if you're a winter sport enthusiast and you're out skiing or snowboarding, the sun is out and you can get a sunburn as well. So, a way for suntan lotion companies to increase usage frequency is to promote other ways that we can use the product. Additionally, uh, uh, this helps to generate brand loyalty. Companies look at the different occasions that we might use different products or services. So all of these relate to the behaviors, the ways in which we look at products, and when we use them and how we use them. And this helps with developing marketing strategies. So if you have questions, please make sure that you send them to us, and we will be sure to get back to you with the answers at a later date. The next learning outcome is to identify the target markets of a firm's offerings. And the things that we look at are the factors that make a target market attractive to an organization, as well as how companies determine the number of the number of markets they will seek to target. So let's look at what makes a target market attractive. So the first thing is the size of the market. If a market isn't large enough to produce enough profit, there's really no reason to go after it. So that's an important thing to look at is the overall in general size of market. You also want to look at the segment growth to see whether or not there's a future in this market and whether or not future sales are possible. There has to be room also in the marketplace for a new competitor. So you could be going into a marketplace, but if it's really saturated and there's really no room for a new competitor, that might not be a place to go. When there's limited competition in a product category, firms can dominate a marketplace by charging higher prices, even offering perhaps inferior goods and blocking access to the market. Also, there might be barriers to accessibility that could include things like geography, politics, technology, social factors. Also, let's look at costs. So, for example, if you have the desire to enter a marketplace with a new airline, perhaps, there's going to be a lot of barriers to entry. So, those are things to consider when moving into it. So, companies need to also have the resources to compete. So, let's say if you decide that you're going into the airline industry, tremendous resources would be needed. A lot of certainly technology, but also political and legal factors might be essential to achieving success. So these are some of the things that companies look at. Limited competition, again, growth, market size, the resources, technology. Is there room for another player in that industry? So let's look at how companies determine the number of markets to target. And this we call multi-segment marketing. So not all companies will go after one specific segment of the marketplace. There might be multiple segments of the marketplace that could meet the criteria and make it attractive enough for a company to enter that segment and see profitability. So let's look at concentrated marketing strategy, where there's very little competition. They go after a particular marketplace, but really seek to dominate that marketplace. And if we look at, for example, Signet Jewelers, right? They have a multi-segment marketing strategy, but it's concentrated. It's all in jewelry. And they have various jewelry stores that will address the needs of people at different economic levels, different income levels, different needs, different styles, and different preferences. They don't face necessarily much competition from smaller shops, but they diversify, and that makes it more appealing for them and certainly more profitable. So in the concentrated marketing strategy, which can be an element of a multi-segment marketing strategy, companies will select will choose a select group of consumers, but it can be risky because if there's a decline in the need for that product, then they don't have any other opportunities, which is why the multi-segment marketing strategy can be appealing. Now, if you're going after a niche marketing strategy, this will focus on an even smaller segment of the marketplace where the company is looking to gain a large share of a small marketplace. So we might look at high-end luxury vehicles as very niche marketing. Now, micro-targeting has really come under a lot of scrutiny for violating consumer privacy and ethics as well, since this really involves gaining very specific details about an individual's consumer's lifestyles, habits, and purchases. So it's one thing to gather demographic information about a group of consumers, or geographic information or psychographic information about a group of consumers. But if you're gathering information about a specific consumer, that's really bordering on the lines of being unethical. So it's not really a good strategy to take. And it's also, as a consumer, we're looking at this as marketers, but also as consumers, to be aware of this strategy and know that it's not really a good way to go. So as you process all of this information, think about any questions that you might have. And as we said, please make sure you post them, and we will get back to you as soon as possible with the answers. So let's move on to product positioning. And we'll talk about different positioning elements. The first is, what is head-to-head positioning? We'll talk about the role of a unique value proposition. We'll talk about why companies reposition their brands, but also some of the risks of that repositioning. So let's talk about head-to-head positioning, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's direct competition with another brand in the same product category. And this is really when a brand will seek to differentiate themselves from the competition and create a way for consumers to perceive their brand in a more favorable way. This helps to, again, as I said, how a brand is differentiated, how the consumer perceives the brand, and will, again, like all of these factors, lead to marketing strategies. So let's talk about the value proposition. Value proposition, it focuses on how a product or service is different from the competition. And this is really where you want to enable the consumer to answer the question, for you to answer the consumer's question, so what? What's in it for me? Why is your product better than somebody else's? And this is where you need to make sure you understand your consumers' needs and what they care about. You need to have a good understanding of what you do really well. But it's also important to understand what your competition does really well, because the unique value proposition is where all of those elements converge and why you stand out, what makes you better than somebody else. And that gives the consumer a reason for buying your product or service. So let's talk about repositioning. Repositioning is when you take your brand and you create a new image around the brand and how your consumer and how the consumers will feel about that brand. So why do we do this? This helps to generate new opportunities. Sometimes we reposition as a response to what the competition is doing. Sometimes we do this to address market changes, and sometimes we do this to address internal changes. So, for example, a change in competition and market changes. Let's look at the growth in popularity of electric vehicles. This has been something that really was kind of started slowly, and now there's almost no auto company that doesn't have an electric vehicle in their line of offerings. So they're addressing that was repositioned to address competition, certainly with Tesla and some of the other major companies really starting to, Tesla changed the entire world of electric vehicles, but the market's changing. Consumers are demanding changes. Consumers are looking for more sustainable options. They're looking to use less fossil fuels and so on. So all of these things are kind of combine again to help companies decide whether or not they should reposition a product. And sometimes there are internal changes like new technologies and new approaches that companies seek to follow. So let's look at some of the repositioning risks. So repositioning can bring new life to a brand, but it should be based on facts. It should be based on what's going on in the marketplace. It should be based on what's going on with competition. It shouldn't be based on emotions where people within an organization say, I feel like we should, we feel like we should be doing things. It should be based on solid information. And if you reposition a brand in a way that isn't addressing market needs, you can lose customer confidence in your brand, in your products. And by doing so, you can also miss out on some of the things that are important to your customers and in the marketplace. You want to make sure that you don't overpromise. You don't want to confuse the consumer. You don't want to confuse your customer about what your product stands for. So when you seek to reposition, it's important to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and in the right way. Again, any questions, feel free to share them on the board, and we will respond to you as soon as possible. For the last learning outcome for Unit 3, we're going to describe the importance of branding. We'll talk about the definition of branding, how a company can achieve successful branding, and the benefits of strong brand equity. And we hear the term brand all the time. What does it mean to be a brand? Well, a brand is anything that's associated with a particular product or service. The name, the term, the sign, the logo, anything that differentiates one offering from another. And, if we think about, and we've talked about this before, the Nike swoosh or the McDonald's golden arches, all of those things help to create branding for that particular company. The goal of branding is to encourage consumers to identify also not just the logo or the trait or the logo or the symbol or the sign, but also the different traits that are associated with a particular product. And by doing so, this helps consumers develop an emotional connection and relationship with that particular product. So branding, how is branding achieved? So branding is achieved through all of the different aspects of marketing, advertising, public relations, direct marketing, all of the messaging, all of the communication. When we talk about the 4 Ps, price, place, promotion, and product, this is the promotion part. That's how branding is achieved. We have marketing, we have advertising, we connect with the public, and we connect with consumers in a way that generates awareness. And by generating awareness, we lead to higher sales. We build trust between the consumer and the product and the company. Also helps to simplify the marketing process. If you have a brand that has strong brand equity, and we'll talk about this in a moment, strong brand awareness, your marketing activities are easier. You could just put out that logo and consumers will automatically know what you're offering. So it really helps to simplify the marketing process. uh, changes the nature of the marketing messaging in a way that connects with consumers. You're able to build those relationships, and as such, you're reaching your target markets. And I think at this point you can see how all of these factors relate back to the things we talked about earlier about market segmentation, and that when you're putting all of this together, you're reaching the appropriate target markets in an effective way. So let's finish this out by talking about strong brand equity. And brand equity is really defined by having a well-known brand name. When you have strong brand equity, consumers tend to believe that your product is of high quality, which will lead to higher sales. And also, psychologists have done some studies and recognize that consumers believe that a strong brand name equates to product quality. And companies use this information to develop pricing structures. They know that they can then charge higher prices for their products with strong brand equity. And it can include the evaluation of brand equity can include changes in market share. It can lead to higher profit margins. It can lead to greater logo recognition. Consumer perception of that brand tends to be higher, and consumers have a tendency to have greater brand knowledge. So all of those factors are associated with strong brand equity, and why it's important to do whatever is possible to generate that strong brand equity. But it's also important to recognize that companies need to be able to support that with a quality product. And so strong brand equity is only as good as the product delivers. If you deliver on your promises, you will be sure to generate even stronger brand equity, leading again to higher sales and profits. And that concludes Unit 3. Again, we're happy to answer any questions that you have at any point, and feel free to submit them, and we'll be sure to get back to you with our answers. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Well, thank you anyone who joined. I don't know. Sorry for all the technical difficulties. We haven't dropped the frame since I said let's give up on trying. So who knows? So we'll go back, watch this. We'll definitely make sure to put a better version that fixes any of the problems that might have been happening on the front end up there. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below on this video or on that video, and we'll answer any questions you've had. And we next week we'll have another video on marketing management. So thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.